All right, so we are diving into your nights today. Um, and this creative project, it's a little delightfully weird. The concept that we are going to be kind of looking at is worst book ever. I gotta say that title alone really kind of got me. Yeah, it got me
Yeah, it's definitely a head scratcher. When you first hear it, it's kind of like, who sets out to, intentionally make something bad?
right. It's like the opposite. It's like the anti-masterpiece.
Yeah.
But before we even get into, why someone would even do this, let's kind of like back up for a second. Our source material is an audio clip from a speaker, and he's someone who is trying to really nail his elevator pitch. And it seems like he's overflowing with ideas, which is awesome, but he's having a hard time finding that one powerful core concept.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, that's something that we all struggle with. If you think about it's like having a million puzzle pieces, but you don't have the picture on the box. So, whether you are working on a presentation or you are writing a book, or even just trying to figure out, what your weekend plans are, having that clear focus can be, really essential.
It's so true. And it seems like with this worst book ever idea, this is kind of like his attempt to cut through the noise. He's thinking of it as a speech topic. So the idea of intentionally writing a truly terrible book and then kind of digging into the why behind that.
Now, that's what I call, turning the tables. He's taking this kind of absurd concept
Yeah.
and he's using it to explore, some pretty fundamental creative roadblocks. He even talks about things like overcoming perfectionism, embracing humor, and that unexpected confidence boost that you get from just finishing something, even if it's bad.
Okay. That's starting to make a little more sense. So it's not really about the book itself. It's more about using this outlandish idea as a springboard for,
Deeper insights.
Exactly. If you are willing to just create something
Yeah.
that is deliberately awful, it really takes the pressure off. I mean, think about it. That inner critic that we all have, that's always screaming for perfection. It might, get a little quieter.
Yeah. And maybe even start to chuckle a bit. I mean, who can be uptight when you are surrounded by intentionally bad writing?
Right. And I think that humor is a key part of this. He uses this great example. Imagine you were at a writer's conference. You are surrounded by all these people.
Yeah.
And everyone's asking, oh, what are you working on? And you just deadpan and say, oh, I'm writing the definitive history of socks in the dryer.
Oh my gosh. I can just imagine what people's reactions would be. That's gold. But it's more than just a funny line, right? Like there's something deeper going on.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It subverts everyone's expectations. Instead of trying to impress with, some high concept novel, he is intentionally playing with the absurd. And that creates this instant connection because it's unexpected, it's memorable,
Yeah.
and it disarms people.
So it's like he's using humor as the secret weapon to cut through the typical posturing to get something more genuine.
Exactly. And, for introverts,
Yeah.
who may find those conference interactions a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
draining, this kind of approach could be a game changer.
Yeah. It's like saying, hey, I don't take myself too seriously. Let's just have some fun with this. But then there's also that underlying challenge to step outside of your comfort zone. He even mentions that, like making a video for this pitch, even though he is primarily a writer.
That's a great point. It's so easy to get stuck in our creative ruts, just doing what we are comfortable with. But this worst book ever concept, it pushes you to experiment, to try things that might feel awkward or even a little scary.
And you might. I mean, in the process, you might even discover hidden talents or new ways of expressing yourself. It's like if you can conquer the fear of making a truly terrible video, I mean, what else can you achieve?
That's the spirit. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing that, growth often comes from pushing those boundaries and being willing to stumble a bit along the way.
I love that. So this worst book ever idea, it sounds like it's less about the actual book and more about using it as a tool to unlock creativity, to conquer fear, and maybe even connect with people in a more authentic way.
Yeah, you are getting it. And speaking of pushing boundaries, he mentions this very interesting tactic called the 1-star, 3-star, 5-star review approach for your worst book ever.
You have to explain this because he doesn't go into detail in the clip, but it sounds like some next level self-critique.
Oh, definitely is. So imagine writing reviews of your own intentionally terrible book, but you are writing it from these wildly different perspectives.
Okay. I am intrigued. Tell me more.
All right. So first you write a scathing 1-star review. You're channeling your inner critic here. This is where you let loose all the negativity, all those harsh judgments that you usually try to suppress.
Ouch. That sounds brutal, but I can see how it would be cathartic.
Exactly. You are acknowledging those critical voices, but you are also kind of putting them in their place. You are not letting them control you. You are simply giving them a designated space to rant.
And then what? Do we move on to the kind of reviews?
We do. Next up is the 3-star review. This is where you try to be more objective, more balanced. You acknowledge the book's flaws, but you're also highlighting any redeeming qualities, even if they are unintentional.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this might work. You are forcing yourself to find the good, even in the bad.
Precisely. You are developing a more nuanced perspective on your own work. You are not sugarcoating anything, but you are also not letting the negativity completely overshadow everything.
And finally, the 5-star review. This is where it gets really interesting, right?
This is where you put on your rose-colored glasses
Rare.
and you write a glowing review of your worst book ever. You celebrate the book's quirks, its unconventional style, its sheer audacity.
So you were basically turning those flaws into strengths. That's brilliant.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that beauty can be found in the most unexpected places. And by celebrating those imperfections, you are also reclaiming your creative power. You are saying, I'm not afraid to be different. I'm not afraid to break the rules. I'm not afraid to create something that might not be for everyone.
You know, this whole review exercise, it's really making me think about how we approach self-critique in general. It's so easy to get caught up in the negative. But what if we could learn to embrace those flaws and even find humor in them?
I think that's the key. It's about shifting our perspective and recognizing that imperfection is not the enemy. It's often the source of our greatest creativity.
And by intentionally creating something bad, we can actually free ourselves to create something truly unique and authentic.
Exactly. We're turning the whole creative process on its head.
And in doing so, we might just stumble upon something truly brilliant. But before we get too carried away, let's bring this back to our listener and their specific project.
Yes, let's do that. Think about the notes that you shared with us. What aspect of your project could benefit from this worst book ever approach? Where are you feeling stuck? Where is that inner critic really holding you back? And what would it look like to kind of intentionally subvert expectations, to embrace the bad and see where it leads?
Yeah. It's funny because the more we talk about this, the less crazy it sounds. I'm starting to see how this worst book ever approach can actually be pretty liberating.
It really is. It's like giving yourself permission to fail spectacularly. And in doing so, you free yourself from those shackles of perfectionism.
Which, let's be honest, can be a real creativity killer. You get so caught up in trying to make everything perfect that you just end up stifling the flow of ideas.
Exactly. This worst book ever concept, it's almost like a playful rebellion against that kind of thinking. It's like saying, okay, inner critic, you want perfect. Well, here's the opposite. Deal with it.
Right.
And maybe, just maybe, that inner critic will loosen its grip a little bit and let you have some fun.
Because
when we can laugh at ourselves and our imperfections, we create space for more authentic expression.
For sure. And that kind of brings us back to that writer's conference scenario. It's not just about being funny, right? It's about connecting with people on a deeper level.
Right. Think about it. When someone tells you they're writing the definitive history of socks in the dryer, it immediately breaks down barriers. It invites curiosity, playful banter.
It does. It also shows a level of self-awareness that can be incredibly disarming.
Exactly. It's like saying, hey, I'm comfortable enough with myself to poke fun at my own work.
Yeah.
And that kind of vulnerability can be surprisingly magnetic. It draws people in.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned earlier that this approach could be particularly helpful for introverts. And I'm starting to see why. It's like having this preloaded conversation starter that's both engaging and self-deprecating.
It's like a social shield.
Yeah.
That's also a secret weapon. It allows you to engage with people on your own terms, with a touch of humor and a wink.
Okay, so speaking of secret weapons, let's dive into this 1-star, 3-star, 5-star review tactic. You mentioned it earlier. I am dying to know more.
Okay, so get ready for some serious mind-bending here. Imagine this. You've written your worst book ever, and now you're going to write 3 reviews of it. But here's the twist. Each review comes from a completely different perspective.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So first you write a scathing 1-star review. You're channeling your inner critic here. This is where you let loose all the negativity, all those harsh judgments that you usually try to suppress.
Ouch. That sounds brutal.
But I can see how it would be cathartic in a way. You're acknowledging those critical voices, but you're also putting them in their place. You're not letting them control you. You're simply giving them a designated space to rant.
Okay. And then what? Do we move on to the kinder
Well, they
reviews?
do. Next up is the 3-star review. This is where you try to be more objective, more balanced. You acknowledge the book's flaws, but you're also highlighting any redeeming qualities, even if they're unintentional.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this might work. It's like forcing yourself to find the good, even in the bad.
Precisely. You're developing a more nuanced perspective on your own work. You're not sugarcoating anything, but you're also not letting the negativity completely overshadow everything.
And finally, the 5-star review. This is where it gets really interesting.
This is where you put on your rose-colored glasses and you write a glowing review of your worst book ever. You celebrate the book's quirks, its unconventional style, its sheer audacity.
So you're basically turning those flaws into strengths. That's brilliant.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that beauty can be found in the most unexpected places. And by celebrating those imperfections, you're also reclaiming your creative power. You're saying, I'm not afraid to be different, to break the rules, to create something that might not be for everyone.
You know, this whole review exercise, it's really making me think about how we approach self-critique in general. It's so easy to get caught up in the negative. But what if we could learn to embrace those flaws and even find humor in them?
I think that's the key. It's about shifting our perspective and recognizing that imperfection is not the enemy. It's often the source of our greatest creativity.
And by intentionally creating something bad, we can actually free ourselves to create something truly unique and authentic.
Exactly. It's like we're turning the whole creative process on its head.
And in doing so, we might just stumble upon something truly brilliant. But before we get too carried away, let's bring this back to our listener and their specific project.
Yes, let's do that. Think about the notes you shared with us. What aspect of your project could benefit from this worst book ever approach? Is there a part of it that feels a little stuck, where you feel like that inner critic is holding you back? And what would it look like to intentionally, subvert expectations, embrace the bad, and see where it leads you?
You know, when we're talking about the speaker's decision to make a video, even though he's primarily a writer, it really struck me how you can almost apply this worst book ever philosophy to any creative pursuit.
Yeah, for sure. It's not just about writing. It's really about pushing your own creative boundaries.
Yeah,
Regardless of the medium.
exactly.
Let's say you're a musician
Mm-hmm.
and you have always wanted to experiment with electronic music,
Mm-hmm.
but you have been hesitant because it feels so different from your usual style.
Right. It can be scary to venture into unfamiliar territory.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what if you approached it with that worst song ever mentality, Give yourself
Interesting.
permission to make the most gloriously awful electronic track imaginable. Embrace those cheesy synth sounds, those offbeat rhythms, those lyrics that make you cringe.
You are giving yourself permission to play, to experiment without that pressure of,
Yeah.
having to create a masterpiece.
Exactly. And who knows? In the process of creating that worst song ever, you might just stumble upon a sound, a melody, a lyrical phrase. That sparks something that's
Yeah.
truly unique, truly innovative.
It's like you are tricking your brain into being creative.
Yeah.
By lowering the stakes, you are taking the fear out of the equation.
Right. And that's where the real magic happens. When we can let go of the need for perfection, that's when we open ourselves up to the whole world of possibilities.
You know, we've been talking a lot about the individual benefits of this worst book ever approach, but I'm also kind of curious about its potential applications. And maybe like a collaborative setting.
Ooh, that's a fascinating angle. Imagine using this concept as an icebreaker or a team-building exercise.
I love that. You could have like a worst idea brainstorming session where everyone throws out the most outlandish, impractical ideas they can think of.
That would be hilarious. And in that safe space
Yeah.
of shared absurdity, who knows what brilliant ideas might emerge? You are creating an environment where people feel comfortable taking risks, where failure is not only accepted, but it's celebrated.
Because sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places.
Absolutely. And remember, the worst book ever, it's not just about being funny or outrageous. It's about challenging those ingrained assumptions about what constitutes good or bad art. It's about expanding our definition of creativity and recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly.
It's about embracing that diversity of creative expression and appreciating that beauty can be found in even the most unconventional forms.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive here into this worst book ever concept, we'll leave you with this.
Think about that project that you shared with us. What would it look like to apply this playful, subversive approach? Where could you inject a dose of bad to unlock something truly unique and unexpected.
Don't be afraid to experiment, to laugh at yourself, and embrace that messy, imperfect journey of creation.
Because sometimes the most brilliant ideas are born from the most audacious acts of creative rebellion.